which are offered under the umbrella of the Indian financial system. Under the financial services, the first service which we will be talking in detail will be the banking service. Now, banks are financial institutions which render a number of services and also act as a link between the surplus and the deficit units of the economy. So, talking about the role of banking in the Indian financial system or in any financial system, now they offer a number of services. Actually, it is the first avenue which comes to our mind when we think of funds, when we think of making a deposit, taking a loan. Banks actually perform these basic functions. Now, in terms of the Indian banking system, all of us know that RBI is the prime regulator of the banks. There are a number of banks which report to RBI. All the banks, be it the private sector banks or public sector banks, your foreign banks, your co-op, your regional rural banks, all these come under the regulation of RBI. Now, talking about some of the general points, what is the role of banks in the economic development? First and foremost, removing the deficiency of capital formation, as all of us know that there might be shortage of capital among certain units in the economy. For them, the first resort would be to approach a bank, get some funds, invest them, and that will then lead to the capital formation. Now, if there is a low saving level in the economy, then that can be offset by provision of funds through the banking system. Apart from that, not only is finance and credit provided to the households, it is also provided to the industry, to the business units. Then extension of the size of market. Now, since we can work on credit through the provision of funds from the banking system, it is actually widening the scope of operations. Now, not only can you operate in your local markets, you can also move to far off markets, not only domestically but internationally also. So, provision of funds, provision of credit helps you expand your scale of operations. Next point is acts as an engine of balanced regional development. Now, the banks are placed not only in tier 1, tier 2 cities but also far off villages. The government or the RBI makes sure that people living even in the backward areas should have access to banking services. Apart from this, the concept of small financial banks, they also ensure that microfinance as a service also ensures that even the lower strata of the society can get collateral free loans and help in running the economy, help in providing oil to run the economy. When financing agriculture and allied activities, as I told you that we make sure RBI through its network of banks, especially the regional rural banks, make sure that even in villages people have access to banking services, and specifically these regional rural banks जिनको हम ग्रामीण banks भी बोलते हैं, they offer credit for agriculture and related activities. Next, for improving the standard of living of the people. So you are able to get loan not only for buying a property but also for buying a vehicle, and you can also purchase products on EMI basis. That all is provided through the banking sector, and hence it is helping in improving the standard of living of the people. Then promotion of new entrepreneurs. Now, seed capital for your ventures, especially for the new entrepreneurs, is provided through the banking sector. Now they will go through the proposal which you have, the investment proposal which you have, and then the government of India is also taking steps that banks help in providing the push to entrepreneurship in our country. Then help in monetary policy. RBI every quarter it frames the monetary policy. It is actually implemented through the system of banking in India. It is through the commercial banks that these policies are actually implemented and reach each and every corner of the country. Actually, the seepage of the monetary policy takes place through the system of commercial banks in India. So these were the functions of the banking sector, role of banking in economic development, very general points. We have discussed them on and off most of the time. So now we move to the challenges to the banking sector. The first and the biggest challenge being the asset quality. Now, for the bank on its balance sheet, the loans are its assets and the deposits made in the bank are its liabilities. Why is it so? Can anyone answer? Why are loans assets for the bank and deposits liability for the bank?
Because the deposits need to be returned to the people who are deposit making the deposit,
Yes, absolutely right. And why are
whereas the loans are need to be paid by the people who take the loan.
okay? So yes, more or less you are correct. Basically, liabilities need to be returned to the people who are the deposits need to be returned to the people who are making them. So that is a liability for the bank. And yes, loans will be returned. Loans actually earn income for the bank. Any asset is actually an income yielding source for a business. So for a bank, the income through a loan is the interest it is earning on the principal amount. So assets for banks are the loans which are given to the customers. Now, the asset quality in the Indian banking sector has fallen over over years, and especially with the last year with the pandemic, the asset quality is expected to fall further. Now, a bad asset is a loan which is not being repaid by the borrower. So, NPAs, that is your non performing assets, are one of the biggest challenges, one of the biggest worries for the Indian banking system. Now, how do we define a non performing asset?
Any loan that is not being paid in more than 90 days.
Very good, absolutely right. So, any loan on which interest or the principal amount is due for a period more than 90 days is a non performing asset for the bank. Now, there is a timeline which is followed for classification of loan from a substandard asset. to a non-performing asset. Basically, time period दिया जाता है that we will do in detail in the upcoming slides कि कब actual में जाके loss asset declare हो जाता है loan. So then the entry is passed, accounting entry is passed. So that I'll take up in the further slides. Now you can have a look at some of the data that has been shared on this slide. The gross NPA for the Indian banking sector has increased fourfold between 2014 to 2018. So actually, this was the time period in which many scams came to the forefront and the loopholes in the banking sector were identified. Then in 2019, the NPA stood at 9.3% of the total assets. Now, this is the last point, gives you the latest data, the financial stability report, which was released in January this year. The RBI has made it clear that gross NPAs may rise to 13.5% by September 2021. So we are looking forward to more defaults because of the pandemic, and which will ultimately lead to an increase in the NPAs of the banking sector. So what are the banks? What is RBI doing to tackle the NPAs? Now, moratorium के बारे में आपने read करा होगा that due to pandemic, moratorium was offered, waiver was offered to the people who had taken loan for interest payments. Now, the Supreme Court has made it clear that no interest should be charged on the interest, but the government now is in no mood to offer more relief to the borrowers in case of loans that have been taken. So that moratorium facility is not being extended now by the government of India. Okay, so one problem is the asset quality. Second challenge is maintenance of capital adequacy. Capital adequacy uh, or the capital to risk asset ratio, risk adjusted ratio. This is a benchmark which the banks have to maintain, and this is mandated by RBI itself. This is basically the ratio of bank's capital to risk. So there are some Basel norms which need to be followed. Basel norms, again, they lay down how the assets of or the capital of the bank needs to be maintained, and it classifies the categories of assets in which the capital of the bank should be maintained. Now, in India, we are following the Basel 3 norms. Basel 3 norms बोलते हैं कि capital adequacy ratio या capital to risk weighted ratio 8% होना चाहिए. RBI mandates that banks should maintain the capital asset ratio at 9%, and they have been emphasized, especially the public sector banks have been emphasized by RBI to maintain this ratio at 12%. So as I keep repeating that our regulatory system, especially RBI, it is very conservative. So conservative in the sense that the benchmark is 8%. Our banks are required to maintain 9%, and they are being promoted to maintain a capital adequacy ratio of 12%. So why banks need to maintain this ratio is basically to ensure the financial stability, to ensure that they are able to meet the liabilities on time. So this ratio is basically it is the capital which is required for the bank to meet its liabilities on time. So this ratio needs to be maintained. It is mandated by RBI. Now, if I go into details, there is a tier 1 capital that needs to be maintained, which is the core capital, consisting of your common stock reserves, and then there is supplementary capital that needs to be maintained, which comes under the tier 2 capital. So that itself is a topic in itself. We'll not go into much details, but it is mandatory. Just understand for the time being, it is mandatory to maintain the bank capital in relation to the risk weighted assets and current liabilities. And this helps the uh, regulators to ensure that commercial banks do not take excess leverage, they do not take excess borrowing and become insolvent in the process, to maintain the financial stability of the commercial banks. Okay, moving further, apart from these two challenges, then we have general challenges, technology. Technology, all of you know that over a period of time, everything has been automated in the banks, and to ensure more and more convenience to the customers, more and more facilities are being offered in that sense. Now, technology is not an issue in private sector banks to a large extent, but the public sector banks and the employees there are still in the process of updating themselves, in the process of adopting the latest technology and offering the latest services to the customers. Now, obviously, there has been much improvement in the working of public sector banks, but still they are lagging behind private sector banks in this aspect. Coming to balance sheet management, now this is a problem which comes to the forefront when any scam is discovered. So we find that the CEO, the senior management in the bank was involved in fudging the numbers on the balance sheet. So all this needs to be checked on time, and such frauds are one of the biggest challenges for the banking sector, where senior management is involved in some unfair practice of over exaggerating the profits, presenting a more perfect picture than what is the reality. That would be one of the challenges of the banking sector. Next would be unhedged forex exposure. So especially in the Nirav Modi scam, this was the problem that came up, that our banks are not hedging their forex exposure. Okay, and then this can impact their balance sheet position to a large extent. Next is corruption, as I talked about in the fourth point, that balance sheet management takes place, and that takes place through the employees who are working in the bank. So when any scam is discovered, when there is any disclosure of that sense, we get to know that the officials present in the bank, they have misused their power, and they were involved in facilitating the scam. Then bureaucracy. Now, bureaucracy, especially in the public sector banks, again, that hampers the smooth functioning of the banking system, because then there is delay in taking decisions, which demotivates people in the organization also, and then such delays also lead to lack of initiatives, people taking up, employees taking up initiatives. Then political pressures. Now, political pressures, how do they hamper the banking system? The political parties, when they release their manifestos, then they offer loan waivers. So the loans that have been taken are waived off by the political parties when they come to power, and then that increases the burden of NPAs in the banking sector. Obviously, for the public sector banks, for the government banks, this pressure increases when such poll promises are made by the political parties, and when they come to power, these promises, when they are actually fulfilled, that leads to burden of NPAs on the banks. Then need for branch rationalization. Now every branch is uh, adding expenditure to the functioning of the banks. So the banks need to rationalize the number of branches in order to ensure that they are cutting down on cost and actually working economically. So, if you have a look at the annual report of a bank, they give their performance in terms of profit per employee. So, for them, the cost unit is the employee, profit per branch. Okay, so for them, cost unit would be an employee or a branch. So there they identify whether each branch which is run is actually giving that much return or not. Okay, so that needs to be rationalized. So these are some of the challenges which the Indian banking sector is facing. Any questions still here, class? Any questions? Yes or no? Okay, thank you for your response. Now we move to the structure of the Indian banking industry. Again, all of you know that RBI, being the prime regulator, keeps a check on all the scheduled banks. Now, scheduled banks are the banks which come under Schedule 2 of the RBI Act, and that covers both the commercial banks and the cooperative banks. Under commercial banks, you have four types of banks: public sector, private, foreign, and RRBs, that is the regional rural banks. Apart from commercial banks, we have cooperative banks. The difference between commercial banks and cooperatives is that commercial banks, they work for commercial purposes, that is with the objective of earning profits. So let us first have a look at the working of scheduled banks in India. So, what are the conditions that need to be fulfilled to qualify as a scheduled bank? The bank should have a paid up capital of at least 5 lakh rupees, and no activity of the bank should be detrimental to the interest of the depositors. If a bank is not qualifying these two conditions, then it is labeled as an unscheduled bank. Okay. So coming to commercial banks, as we discussed the meaning, they are providing a number of financial products services, and each and every activity is being provided in the interest of the depositors, but with the objective of earning profits. So, functions of commercial banks: accepting deposits, providing loans, credit creation. So, credit creation is actually the point that differentiates a bank from a non banking financial company, because deposit of one person becomes the loan for the other person. So in this way, the banks, they create credit, which is actually the most important function which is performed by a bank. Apart from that, banks also facilitate foreign trade through the bills of exchange guarantees which are offered by the importers bank and the exporters bank to the counterparty. Then agency services, so your collection and payment of checks. So bank actually represents the customers, acts as the agent of the customers uh, at various levels while providing various services. So like selling of shares, debentures, payment of bills, issuing bills of exchange, payment and collection of dividends. All this is the all these are the services where banks act as the agent of the customer. Apart from that, there are many miscellaneous services, a number of services which are offered by the banks. So there you can see letter of credit, locker facility, traveler's check. All these are other facilities offered by the banks. Then next we come to the meaning of development banks. Now, development banks are banks which are uh, in, incorporated with the objective of providing specialized services to specific sectors of the economy. So these are multi-purpose financial institutions, and they are actually incorporated for specific sector. So they are promoting a particular sector of the economy. So you can have a look at the second point. They are financial institutions concerned with providing all types of financial assistance to business units in form of loans, underwriting, investment guarantee operations, economic development in general, and industrial development in particular. So they are actually promoting certain industries. Like the first development bank in India was IFCI, Industrial Finance Corporation of India, and it was incorporated with the main objective of providing finance to medium and large scale industries. So, what are the features? They are specialized financial institutions. They provide medium to long term loans. These development banks would be in the nature of non banking financial companies. They are providing funds, providing loans, but they are not accepting deposits. They are not only lending institutions, but they are, apart from the basic loan facility, they are also offering a number of specialized services to the industrial units. So they also promote the saving and investment habit, provide financial assistance to private and public sector undertakings, and the basic objective is to promote public interest. They are not working for commercial purposes. to promote industrial growth, develop backward areas, providing employment opportunities, reviving sick units, improving capital markets. So all these points actually highlight the objectives of the development banks in our country. So these are some of the examples of development banks. So for industries, you have IDBI, SIDBI, IFCI. For agriculture, NABARD. For housing, you have NHB, National Housing Bank. And for export import sector, the development bank would be Exim. So last topic for the day, what is the difference between commercial banks and development banks? So as I told you, the first and foremost difference would be that commercial banks, they operate for profits. The basic motive is to maximize profits, but development banks are working for the national interest. Now, even the as I told you, incorporation process is different. Commercial banks are set up as companies, while development banks are set up through special acts passed by the government. Commercial banks are ordinary financial institutions, while development banks would be multi-purpose institutions. One would accept deposits, that is the commercial banks. However, development banks do not accept deposits. Again, check facility will be offered by commercial banks and not by development banks. Commercial banks can create credit while development banks do not create credit because they are not accepting deposits. So these would be the main points of difference between the commercial